Hello and welcome to another episode of Disc 2 Movie Review with me, Rhian Evans. Joining me again in this episode are Martyn, Cain and Lee Stevens. And this week we're looking at Alex Garland's 2018 sci-fi thriller Annihilation and Stanley Kubrick's 1968 visual masterpiece 2001: A Space Odyssey. So sci-fi week. Sci-fi is not my favourite genre. Not that I don't...
It is mine.
Okay. Yeah. Gonna be awkward.
You look like the sort that would go to Comic-Con, don't you?
Yeah. Let's start with Annihilation.
Did your husband contact you at any point while he was away?
No. It was his decision to go in. Why did my husband volunteer for a suicide mission? You have to tell me where he was, what he was doing. I need to know what's inside.
Go for it.
I thought it was a bit flat. I find it weird with Netflix, like original movies. They just never seem to hit the marks that the TV shows do. Do you know what I mean? Like, but the TV shows always feel like a big budget film, but then their original films always feel like low budget movies. It never sort of works for me. It was more the visuals I liked in it. I like the setting of it and how sort of isolated they feel, even though they just sort of walked into a field.
I know what you mean with it being flat, because the main thing I noticed, especially about the sound, was that it was all very muffled, which I'm assuming was the intention. But I wrote down, like, the transitions were so quiet. Everything about the film was quiet. So if you weren't paying attention, you'd just be like, what the hell is going on now?
And it feels like nothing's going on as well.
Yeah, it's a big sort of waiting round for something to happen. And then you get little things now and again, like a giant crocodile or alligator or whatever it was, and a giant weird
bear
thing.
Skull bear.
No skull bear. Yeah, a big skull bear, yeah. It just seemed a bit odd.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe that was it. Maybe there weren't enough like jumpy attack moments and it sort of dragged itself out
because
a bit like that.
The horror moments I thought were quite good. Really gruesome when the bear like rips the woman's throat out.
Yeah, and just smacks her and knocks half her face off. And I don't know whether, as you say, that sort of horror moment, they were going on that for like effect. So you've got to wait for ages, and then something horrific would happen, and then it goes off again.
Yeah.
Is it Keira Knightley? It is, isn't it?
No, it's Natalie Portman.
I always get the two of them mixed up. But to be fair, I feel the same about Natalie Portman as I do Keira Knightley, where it's almost like they've had all personality sucked out of them. So at any moments that I was supposed to have any gravitas, and she's just got that dazed squirrel look where she's looking completely through everything that's going on and like 2 miles somewhere in the foreground. A different caster might have made, especially coming to the end, where it all goes a bit crazy and stuff. I think the somebody else in that role would have made it feel a bit more grounded, because you'd have identified with the character a little bit more. Even the bit where she's on the boat, where they're on the boat, she's talking about when she was in the army and stuff like that. Yeah. And it was all just really cliched of like, sort of, I'm beautiful, but you probably didn't realise this, but I was also in the army.
Right. And I think that, like what we were saying about the scenes sort of not dragging on, but being quite, like, not much happening for a while and then a quick shock. It worked because obviously, like Alex Garland, who did Annihilation, did 28 Days Later, and it worked in that with the whole sort of like destitute or desolate London sort of thing, and then you're getting like the infected running after the characters and things. I think it worked quite well in that. But I think I enjoyed it, but I'm also aware as well that Alex Garland's done a lot of really good films in the past.
What else has he done?
So he did Ex Machina, he did Sunshine. So we did that, and like the guys who did the soundtrack did the same. They were the same guys that did Ex Machina as well, and so like I really liked the soundtrack to it, and that repeating like acoustic guitar line that was going through it.
Yeah, I did say the noise is good at making me feel uncomfortable.
Because it kind of is, as you say, like with it being like a sci-fi film, you don't expect like those sorts of instruments to be used, but then when kind of like right at the end when it personifies itself, the alien, the species or whatever, and then the noise of that species is more like what you would get. It's like an old synth that's been like distorted up, and it's more what you get with a classic sci-fi film, which was quite cool that they'd done it like that.
Yeah, Lee, you said not much happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bit where she's kind of like sparring with herself, the alien version of herself.
Yeah.
I thought I got really annoyed with that, and I know it's partially because I've got a cold as well, but I got so annoyed, and I angrily typing, "Nothing is happening. How are we going? How many more times are we going to spar with the weird metal version of Natalie Portman and lose?" Because it happened like 4 times, and I was like, "Is this it forever now?"
Is it like 2 hours, 10 minutes, something like that? I can't remember how long the film is. It's over 2 hours, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about
Around that
It's
time.
not far over if it
It
is.
feels like an hour and a half's worth of film.
Right.
Yes.
If you cut a half an
Yeah.
hour of chaff out of it, it's
Yeah.
probably a reasonably good
Yeah.
hour and a half
Just like,
sci-fi film.
guys, we need to add an extra half hour.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just going to copy and paste a couple of scenes within a scene.
Well, I think it's probably a little bit of director indulgence, isn't it? You know, because wanting the shots of like because like the foliage is quite cool. You know, having different species on it
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So having those moments of them just wandering around, so you can have like the vision of the scene in it.
Yeah.
I think that might be part of the problem.
I literally wrote bit self-indulgent from the director. But I thought that with 2001 as well, you know, that seemed to be the key thing linking both directors, is that it looked great, but it was very self-indulgent. And I was reading on IMDb that the director of Annihilation was arguing with someone who said he was worried about the film being too intelligent and too intellectual, and people are just going to get bored and not understand it, which I could get, because I was getting a bit like frustrated with it.
Yeah, but
That was an
There's
old
a
argument made
difference.
for 2001 as well.
Yeah, I
So,
read
it
that
was
as well,
Arthur
yeah.
C. Clarke was worried that it was going to be too above people.
The thing is, like, I thought, both the plots were really clever and really good, but because the pacing was so slow, I found myself getting bored, and that's when I would get confused, because I'd like
yeah,
snap out, when in reality the plot's good.
That's
Just
what I
needed
was
to be
going to say
faster.
about Annihilation is you can say, oh, it might be too intellectual for the audience, but there's a difference between being too intellectual and not being able to keep your attention span for
Yeah.
the whole of a film.
Very true, yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean about it being like feeling like it's quite long as well.
Yeah.
And I'd just say if you knocked maybe like 20 minutes of it, or knocked some of them, like trying to show off like the special effects for the nice landscapes and everything, maybe a bit in a different way, then maybe they could have condensed it all down a bit.
But think about it. Who are the characters?
Yeah, quite bland. Because
Yeah.
I wrote down, I was like, oh, it's good, like it passes, do you know the Bechdel test?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's basically a test that looks at female characters and whether or not they can have a conversation with each other that doesn't revolve around a man.
All right.
And it's quite shockingly rare, like in a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's getting much better now, but it's surprising. And I was like, oh, it passes the Bechdel test, you know. But then again, it was like, why do they have to be army women to not be talking about men? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that was me just putting my feminist hat on for a little bit.
But you've got them in that what's like stereotypically male role,
Yeah.
and then that's the only way that you can't.
That's the only
do it,
way
yeah.
to not talk about men, yeah.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. The characters were kind of obviously like kind of Spice Girls. Each had a personality,
yeah.
and yet they were still quite
couldn't connect to any
unmemorable.
of them.
Yeah.
I can't think of any character's name. Not,
Just Keira
not
Knightley's.
even- Yeah, just Keira Knightley.
Yeah. Wasn't what even was she called? It began with an L, didn't it?
No, that's what I mean. I can't think of any
Yeah, I
character
can't
name.
Okay.
think of their names actually.
Yeah, I can't really remember what the rest of them did. Like for why they were in there. Was it just because they were ex-army or the current army?
I don't know.
Oh God,
Well.
the silence speaks volumes there.
Tell
I
you what.
love it, doesn't it?
We keep selling this like this. We're gonna have to beat Netflix sponsorship off with a stick.
Shall we move on to 2001: A Space Odyssey?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dave, do you mind if I ask you a personal question?
No, not at all.
I've wondered whether you might be having some second thoughts about the mission. I never gave these stories much credence, but particularly in view of some of the other things that have happened, I find them difficult to put out of my mind.
Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
I think we said just before about like the length of that, and obviously it is very long, that film.
Yeah.
But I'd like Well, a lot of it where it feels like it's dragging on and there's nothing much going on. I think it sort of Kubrick did that on purpose to sort of make you feel the sort of isolation of being in space.
Yeah.
As well. Although, fun fact, there's about 88 minutes worth of non-dialogue scenes in that film.
Yeah.
Now, I did look up that is a whole Wicker Man or a whole airplane is 88 minutes
That is a
long.
fun fact.
It's, I quite like as well that like a Kubrick film is quite stylized. Maybe like Full Metal Jacket to a point as an exception, but if you look at something like 2001 and you see the furniture in the departure lounge, and you go, that could just be in the Corova Milk Bar or in the the house in the Home Invasion in the Clockwork Orange.
Kind of feels like it's all in the same universe.
It's it's got that sort of thing to it.
I thought a lot of things looked incredibly realistic, even by today's standards.
There was loads of things that were pioneered in that. It wasn't even in like the Dawn of Man bit. That was the first time anyone had done like rear screen projection.
Okay.
Where you put like, essentially a blanket up behind the foreground and then project a background onto the back of that.
So you can walk in front of it without the shadows getting. Yeah, like things like the pen floating when one of the first space scenes, and the pen was actually stuck to a sheet of glass. And like apparently, if you look closer, if you just know that it's there, when the woman gets to grab the pen, you can actually see her pull it off the glass.
Yeah.
But I don't know if those things just haven't dated, because basically between that and Blade Runner, that's our vision of the future.
Maybe.
Like really, as I say, the transport through to like how Star Wars looks. That's 2001. That's his idea of space. And like Star Trek and things, you either get this really clean, bright design for something in space, or you get like the Blade Runner one, which
Neon
is like
Hell.
Neon Hell. It's an inner city with more neon lights. And so whether it maybe has aged quite badly, but that's just our view of the future. And every film since then, basically, like that's why, like for me, like Kubrick and probably Hitchcock are like proper geniuses when it comes to film.
It is just the amount of effort, isn't it? That every single thing is covered and thought of.
That's why you only get a few geniuses, isn't it? Because it's very easy for somebody to be really, really, really good at something, but it takes that almost psychopathic level
attention to detail
to take the next step to essentially why most geniuses end up like being rubbish people at everything else in their lives. How did you find it?
I didn't like it. Well, no, I appreciated it. I appreciated it, but like I said before, because I'm ill, I felt like my soul was coming out my body.
And it is quite a hard going film as well. You know, if you've got like a cold and like you're already like bunged up and things. Like I was saying to you before that, you know, even just watching the scenes where they're out of the spaceship and all you're listening to is the breathing. And it's like, that's pretty hard going. And it just goes on for that little bit too long to make it uncomfortable. And I know that was the point in it. But from a viewer's perspective, it doesn't really help much, does it?
I thought it was written for the director rather than being written for an audience. But for what it was achieving at its time, I was like, yeah, fair play. You know, you would, wouldn't you? I did read that it gained financial success from people going and watching it on drugs. Because a lot of people didn't like it, and then people started taking drugs and going to watch it. And
I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't half of the idea of while making it. You know,
especially at the time. Yeah. The thing is, I really liked the plot and the darkness behind it.
Yeah.
It was just the pacing.
I like the claustrophobia of it. And like like you said before about the isolation, I think the only other sci-fi film where I can think makes you feel that alone is like the external shots of the Nostromo and Alien.
Okay, where it's really
same sort of expansive feeling.
Yeah.
Space does scare me. Maybe that's something that why I've never been. I've always
space.
been. That's why I've never been to space, guys. No, I've always been drawn to like fantasy.
Okay,
but not sci-fi, and I think it's because space has always kind of freaked me out.
Yeah. I get that, and like that sort of loneliness and the fact that it's quiet and there's no walls as such because you can't actually see an end to it and things. But that's why I liked, you say the same sort of isolation thing with Moon as well. Have you ever
Moon
seen
was
that?
very good.
Yeah, and that like really loneliness kind of thing. But that's where. I suppose a little bit ironically, given the length of 2001, because it was based on a short story.
Oh, was it?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
It was based like an Arthur C. Clarke book, and there was, I think it was him who actually like advised on different things within the film. And one of the things was they were going to make Hal an actual robot, and he said, "No, make it just this red light, because Arthur C. Clarke apparently, not could see in the future, obviously that's ridiculous, but said when you get like artificial intelligence in the future, it's not going to be something that is going to be like a cute robot that you can see. It's just going to be this sentient being. So they've represented Hal by this red light.
Amazing foresight.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah.
In one scene, I swear it looks like they have an iPad as well. So
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
yeah, they did pretty well at
Yeah.
guessing. Is it your favourite sci-fi film?
No, it's not my favourite sci-fi film. I think just because I like Kubrick a lot.
Yeah.
If it wasn't Kubrick, I probably wouldn't like the film.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
Did you read the insurance fact about 2001? He
Maybe.
was so paranoid about us discovering
Bring aliens.
extraterrestrial life.
Yeah.
He tried to insure the film against it. What did you think of the end?
It's good. I mean, it's very pretentious and big. Well, it's the ultimate life circle, isn't it? That you
I've
do.
no idea. I'll be perfectly
It's,
honest.
it's
I was so confused the first time I watched 2001 at the end.
is it just basic? Yeah, I don't know. It's basically just the dawn of time, and then
Go through like human advancement, and then it's the next.
and then he becomes a god, doesn't he? In the end, it's kind of like
I always read it
angel
of him
type thing.
becoming part of a global, universal consciousness type thing.
Okay.
I saw it.
Yeah.
what? Right.
It's like the next stage in evolution is that we're going to be. Yeah.
What's it called? A monolith.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's the crack with that?
What's the crack with that? And I feel like that's the most basic question because I know it's there from start to finish. But I mean, I didn't know what a monolith was, so I looked it up, and it says something that's like unchanging, basically.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, oh, maybe that's what the film symbolizes because it's slow and unchanging.
I'd love it if that's what it was all about.
Yeah.
He put all this thing and he goes, oh, really? I've just made you watch nearly 3 hours of nothing.
But yeah, I was trying to figure it out, and I do think, and it's good because it does make you think, and it's obviously clever and very deep, which I enjoy. But I still couldn't really figure it out.
I always wish that in situations like this is why I hate multiple endings of video games and stuff. Because I always think, well, that's great, but I'd like to know what the original idea behind this was. So I always think in these things which are a bit nebulous where you can make your own idea.
Yeah.
I wish the director or writer would just say, well, this is what I think it is, and have it sealed somewhere, or somewhere completely different. So if you want to go and find out what his vision was, you can go and do it.
You can go
Totally
and
agree.
That's the truth.
Yeah, totally agree.
I think the monolith, in the context of the film, is the idea of God.
Right.
And that's either that's what God is, it would be the monolith, or something that's been put there to propel the monkeys into another place.
So
That's
it
what I think it
represents a
is.
higher power.
Yeah, that works.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go with that.
Or just like bit of IKEA furniture. That wasn't-
It does
was
look
left
a
on
bit
set.
like, yeah.
It's a leftover bit.
Just picturing it now on set being an accident, and then Kubrick just being like, "No, leave it."
It's unchanging.
Who left that board up there? Paint it black.